this ends the portion of the Family Court 325. We'll be moving into CD6. I noticed, I was going to say, all of the CD6 members are out in the room waiting. And I'll remind you, Mr. Cope, our very first person, and again, everyone drew numbers, just as a reminder, people drew numbers. So it's random order, random chance. So our first person who drew number 1 was Ken Cope. Ken, I'll just remind you that your timekeeper is right here. And just so let me switch over questions and we'll get started.
Very good.
In 1 minute, please tell us about yourself and why you are running for office.
First of all, good morning. My name is Ken Cope, and I'm running to be your next United States Representative for Congressional District 6. I'd like to start with by telling you I have no skeletons in or out of my closet. Okay? I am not a politician. I am an outsider. My bride and I have been married for 43 years. We have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, and that's why I'm running this race, because I'm concerned of what the country is going to look like that they're going to inherit, and that's my grandchildren and yours. I rose from being a private in the United States Army, retiring as a lieutenant colonel, and I also retired as an aerospace executive, a little company called Triumph right here in the Metroplex. So when you look at my leadership skills and my business skills, it's exactly what we're needing in Washington, D.C. to be able to maneuver and solve the problems and the issues that you have as citizens in this district. I'm looking forward to being your voice in Washington, and I ask for the opportunity to do that. As my employer, I'm asking you for that opportunity. I'll guarantee you one thing: your voice will be heard.
Thank you very much. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
Excellent question. First of all, if you take a snake out of the swamp and you put another one in the swamp, you still have a swamp. So it's very important that you choose wisely as to the integrity and the character of the people that you're sending forward. That's one of the reasons why I've come forward. You have to start with the basic of the people. I want to make sure that the Constitution is being followed. We've had too many representatives that don't understand the Constitution or not committed to its enforcement. As a military officer, I understand what that is. I've served it for many, many years, and I will force many of those issues to be looked at and compared to the Constitution. It becomes my safety net and my backdrop. Using that, it puts the people right back in control of the way they're supposed to be according to the Constitution.
Thank you very much. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
Wonderful question. This is not a new position for me. I absolutely believe in term limits. I've already signed the pledge that says 3 term limits for this particular position is the max that I would serve, provided that I cut the muster on the first term and you elect me to a second, if it is so required. I do not believe that we should be allowing people to stay 34 years in Congress. I think that was just a travesty, and we should not have done it, and I voted for the individual every single time. So I understand where you are as citizens, because I'm just one of you. Yes, I would support a constitutional amendment to establish term limits. I think it's 2 for the senators, which would give them 12 years in office, and it's 3 for United States representatives. That's the way our founding fathers intended us to be, as citizens coming forward and serving our government and our people, not the other way around.
Thank you very much. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
DACA is a very slippery slope. I have not deviated my position. I ran against John Cornyn in 2014. I established a position on immigration, and it still holds true today. I do not like DACA the way it is. I believe we should be going straight for a full immigration bill, which incorporates the very things that the president is trying to do. I support the president and what he is trying to do with DACA. It is a short-term gap. I do not believe in amnesty. I believe that there is a process that can be put in place to be fair and reasonable people for the errors that we have made for 30 years. But I do not like DACA the way it is. I think that what is happening today with the shutdown of the government, the president is doing a wonderful job, and I support him in that, and that the Democrats are the ones who have shut it down. Mr. Schumer's shutdown and government shutdown of what we're trying to do with our government is exactly what is the problem. And they're trying to use DACA, which is not the right thing to do. They agreed with everything else, but they want to try to raise that one. I support all the people that are here in our country, but we also have a Constitution. And the 14th Amendment is very clear about anchor babies. There are no such things as anchor babies, and we need to be prepared to go forward and do that. But there is a plan, there is a way that I believe the President has the right direction in what he's trying to bring in place so that we can build the wall, because that is the number one in any plan, is we've got to build the wall.
Thank you very much. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
Wonderful question. I commend the board for pulling those questions, but it allows everything that's not covered and provided to the government as their powers under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution falls back to the state has the authority to do that. So many of the laws that we're living under, whether it be EPA or BLM or the various different educational issues, are rolled up and going beyond what the Constitution allowed them to do. As a state, you have the authority and the ability to question that and say, no, that doesn't apply, it's outside the Constitution. And we do not do that enough. I believe that we should be looking at that going forward as to push back against the policies as part of that first question you asked, how do you do that? This is part of it, is how do you exercise your rights and your control under Article 10, which everything that is not given to the government falls to the state. And I absolutely support that. And as your congressman, I would be viewing every piece of legislation, is it in line with the Constitution, or is that a state responsibility?
Thank you very much. Your 6th and final question. Why should we vote for you over all these other candidates?
Thank you very much. First of all, when you look at my experience from the leadership that I've had in the military to my business experience on an international global supply chain management for manufacturing, I have an undergraduate in accounting, a master's in corporate finance, a master's in military science. I understand the needs of the people, and I understand what you need is a voice, something you haven't had in Congress in the last several years. I want to be your voice, and as I said earlier, I'll guarantee you one thing. There's a lot of things you can't guarantee when you go to Washington. You can't say because there's so many other people involved. I can't guarantee what legislation is going to be there, but I will guarantee you this. I will be your voice, and your voice will be heard. I am not a wallflower. I'm not afraid to stand up and say no when no is appropriate and yes when it is appropriate. I'm not afraid to be a statesman and stick my hand out and say, we've got to come to terms for the people. So many of careers are being looked at now, and we need to be looking at the people. I'll be your voice for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Cope. Please give him a round of applause. Since you're finished, Mr. Cope, you can feel free to join the audience. Our second candidate is Jake Ellzey. If you want to join us at the podium.
Can I steal that?
Absolutely, you may. Actually, let's go to the podium. Just as a reminder, your timekeeper is right here. He will give you a yield sign and a stop sign.
Okay.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Question number 1. In 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
Well, thank you and hello. I'm Jake Ellzey, and for 20 years I served our country in the United States Navy. I took part in the opening strikes of Afghanistan in 2001, flying an F-14, fought beside Navy SEALs in 2006 in Iraq, and led a fighter squadron into combat off of an aircraft carrier in 2009 and 2010. I'm now an airline pilot, have a small business in Ellis County, and I'm a commissioner on the Texas Veterans Commission. For the last 29 years, I've been under oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, and I'd like to continue that life of public service as your next congressman. I'll vote to secure the border, end chain migration, and end sanctuary city policies that allow lawbreakers to reside in those cities. I will vote to increase the military spending, overhaul the VA, and I will serve you honorably every day with honor, with dignity, and honor my family and you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the powers of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
You follow the Constitution. Where in the Constitution is the deep state? Where in the Constitution are any of the agencies that seem to have a complete control over our nation? They are limiting our economic power, they're limiting our freedoms Who has not something on here tonight, either your phone or your clothes or your cars or anything else that's not regulated by the deep state? According to the Constitution, only Congress can pass laws and levy taxes. What is a regulation and a fee? It's the same thing. It's a law and a tax. How can we possibly be $20 trillion in debt after all this time with all the tax revenue we generate? I can't explain it, but we have to start cutting now, and unelected bureaucrats do so with vigor and sometimes with animosity toward the freedom of our country. And I will do everything I can to get them out of our lives. The EPA, OSHA, so many of them that we have to deal with every day. That's the state's job, not the federal government's.
Thank you, sir. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
I vowed to serve only 5 terms, 10 years in Congress. That will not make me eligible for a pension because I think for me, service is a calling and it should be for everybody else too. I can't speak for everybody else. And in the past, I have said that term limits are every 2 years. You vote. However, the system, not necessarily rigged, but it certainly is set up for the incumbents. And it's very difficult to break in. Me as a veteran, after 20 years of service, it's very hard for me to break into continued public service in politics because the game's not meant for somebody like me. So I'm all for 5 terms and 10 years. I think that I would propose a constitutional amendment. I think 6 terms, 12 years, two terms for the Senate, 6 terms for the House is acceptable. And I think that that's something we need to do now because it's time. You shouldn't be in Congress for 30 years. At that point, it's not a calling, it's a career, right? So for me, it's not a career, it's a calling.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA? And would you support it as it is currently worded?
Pretty simple question. I don't need 90 seconds for this one. DACA is an unconstitutional executive order making a law. The president cannot do that. DACA means deferred. They were going to deport those people in the first place. Now it's just we're going to push it back a little bit. So under its curtain, no. This is a power play. Everybody says this is about the people living here. This is a power play by the Democrats. It has nothing to do with 860,000 people. They know full well this is about 15 million people. And if you use chain migration and grant amnesty to 860,000 under its current plan, that's 15 million people entering this country illegally to now vote Democrat. This is all about power for the Democrats, and it always has been. So it's time it stopped. I'm completely against DACA under its current program. Now, if you want to serve in the military for 5 years, maybe we can talk. But right now, absolutely not. So DACA never existed in 2010, 2011. President Obama admitted he had no power to institute DACA, and in 2012 he did it anyway.
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
To all 50 states. It's not just the state of Texas. The 10th Amendment says the power is not reserved to the federal government, but reserved to the states instead. The Constitution is a very simple and short document. You can read it in a couple of hours. That takes me about 3. But it's a very simple document. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, grant these powers to the federal government. That's what the preamble says. The last part I added, but it's we, the people. We grant the federal government the power for what they do. That's been flipped on its head over many, many years. Started with the 16th and 17th Amendment with income tax and the direct election of senators. And it's gone on since then with the Great Society and with the New Deal. They have taken more and more power for us, more and more money from us. We have $152,000 in debt per household in this country with $20 trillion in debt for the country. That cannot stand. I don't run out of fear. I run out of hope. I have many, many friends who have lost their lives defending this country. We are at a crossroads, and we can fix it. So I run off of hope, not out of fear. So the states give the federal government their rights. They have taken too much, and it's time to release that back to the states.
Thank you, sir. And your 6th and final question, why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
We have a lot of good candidates here today. In 2001, on a bright, shiny day, I was a pretty cocky fighter pilot flying an F-14 Tomcat around the ship. We were doing simulated bombing runs over the water right next to the ship. I climbed out at 4,000 feet, got into a 15-degree dive, and at 500 feet, nose down, 15 degrees nose down, 500 miles per hour, I looked down, took my eyes off the ball. I bottomed out at 50 feet at 500 miles an hour in a 15-degree dive. That's 0.2 seconds from impact. I'm not that good of a pilot. This happened because God had said, "Not today, son." Fast forward to April 6th of 2007, a Navy SEAL who I wear on my wrist, wear it every day. He lost his life, giving his life for this country, and I do this for him. I often wonder why I lived and he didn't. I can't answer that. The only thing I can answer is I'm doing this to honor him, you, my family, and my God with continued service to this country, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellzey, very much. We appreciate it. You feel free to join the audience. Our next candidate is Mark Mitchell. Mark, if you could please go to the podium. Just as a reminder, your timekeeper is this gentleman right here. He'll give you a yield sign and then a stop sign, and we ask you to stop at then.
Excellent.
First question. In 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
My name is Dr. Mark Mitchell, obviously this funny jacket that I've got on. And I was born and raised in Fort Worth. I have graduated UTA a long time ago in public health and have since gotten 2 medical degrees, a law degree, seminary degree, and went and did a health policy fellowship sometime after that to study the intensive problems with our healthcare system. The reason that I'm running for this office is I've been looking at the United States federal government for a long time, but with the birth of my son 2 years ago, I said, you know, spending is outrageous. I said, the federal debt is outrageous. And after looking at it, I said, the roads are really not taken care of. And all of a sudden, I said, something needs to be done. And I believe that I'm the person to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
Well, I think that if Congress would take back the regulation writing from agencies, and if Congress would follow the Constitution, enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, the court system in Article 3, Section 2, and the executive branch as well, if we have checks and balances that we need to follow under the Constitution without the legislative branch going crazy, making laws and enacting things that they really have no business enacting. I believe that to do this, Congress must know the Constitution, legislators must know the Constitution, and then follow it.
Thank you, sir. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
I totally support term limits. I think that term limits avoid career politicians, which we really don't need. And I would support an amendment that in Congress every 2 years, that it's a maximum of 3 terms. For the Senate, it's 2.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
No. DACA, you know, is the basically amnesty for the 700,000 children that were brought to this country. And I believe ultimately that amnesty can cost the government $6.3 trillion because of the tax benefits that illegal households receive as compared to paying taxes. And so because of this, I really don't believe, and I believe that President Trump and the Congress did a good thing in not passing that just recently last night at 1:15 in the morning. And so I would not support it either, based on the fact that giving amnesty is really not the way to go.
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
The 10th Amendment basically, as I read it, has to do with that any enumerated powers that are not taken to the federal government and or prohibited by the states basically go to the states and or the people. And so the rights that we have, the states really have the power to write most of the the laws except for the enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8. And so that's to me the essence of the 10th Amendment.
Thank you, sir. Your sixth and final question. Why should we vote for you over all these other candidates?
I believe you should vote for me because of my education and my experience. I'm a medical doctor, attorney, home builder, small business owner. I have had extensive experience in health policy, and I believe most urgently my prescription for better government is to repeal Obamacare. If we can't repeal it because of the legislators not agreeing, then we need to fix it, because healthcare should fix an arm and a leg, not cost one. Right now it's costing us $2 billion in extra spending, $1 billion or $1 trillion in taxes, and $800 billion in Medicare cuts. We need to fix healthcare. In addition, we need to maintain lower taxes, and that means you need to end regulation, continue lower taxes, and that's what our government should be doing, monitoring and spending. I appreciate this opportunity to speak tonight, the invitation that you've given me, and I just thank you for your consideration and your vote.
Thank you, candidate Mitchell. Please join me in thanking him as well. Our next candidate is Troy Ratterree. Oh, thank you very much. Please go ahead and bend the podium. Just to remind you, your timekeeper is right here in front of you. We'll give you a yield sign and a stop sign, and we'll get started. Your first question. In 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that put this great event together today, and thank all of y'all for taking your time to be here. My name is Troy Ratterree. For 35 years, I've been married to my beautiful wife, Rosa. We have 3 boys, 2 daughter-in-laws, and 4 grandkids. Rosa and I attend Tate Springs Baptist Church and have taught the 8th grade there for over 20 years. I own a family business. It began at Traders Village in 1980. Now it's grown into a global corporation. In 2015, my business was threatened by regulation from the Department of Energy. I led a group of small businesses to fight the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C., sought the help of my congressmen, my senators, and our president. I found Congress lacked authority to approve regulations that affect our lives both financially and personally. I'm running to bring back powers to Congress through our Constitution that past leaders have neglected.
Thank you. Question number 2. Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
Again, Congress's job is to pass laws, and the Department of Justice's job is to enforce those laws. And Congress is going to have to hold the Department of Justice responsible for doing their job. We have great laws on the books, and when you take a rogue situation like we have now, where apparently the FBI did everything they could to affect the Trump presidency and continues to try to damage his presidency, that has to stop. So who's going to take the action? Well, the one thing that Congress can do is affect the purse of these agencies, and we can affect the president and the Department of Justice and how they will enforce our laws. So if we have to, in Congress, if nothing else, we can affect the purse and we can change the purse. And if that's what it takes, that's what I'd be willing to support to do.
Thank you, sir. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
That's a great question, and that's a platform I am here today for. I will run for 2 terms, only 2 terms, 4 years, and there's a reason for that. The number one reason is I fear the power that politicians have when they get to that swamp we call Washington, D.C. We've seen examples already of a good man that had this very job that I want. And what happens when you stay too long? You just begin to grow webbed feet so you learn how to swim in the swamp. I don't want to swim in a swamp. I want to represent you, I want to fight for you, and I want to fight hard for 4 years. And at the end of that, I will be exhausted, and I'll be done. And you know what I want to do? I want to pass that torch on to the next man that stands up here and does the same thing. If you want somebody that's a career politician, there's some of them here today that want to be 20 years and they want to make a job of it. I have no reason to make a job of this. I will go to Corbin, Texas in 4 years, and I will fish in my pond. But before that, I just want to say 3 terms is the absolute longest a congressman should serve.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
No. Deferred action are the first 2 words in DACA. Deferred is the important thing. Deferring what? We were deferring the legality of these people to remain in our country, as I understand it. DACA is a mistake. It has been a mistake. I think there's a way for us to change the problem we have with undocumented workers in the United States of America. We can't sit out here and create a human travesty. We can't say 11 million people, get up and get out of here. That's not going to work. We're going to create a human crisis beyond our compassionate hearts as Republicans. Even though we want people here legally, we have to make sense about what we choose to do. There is E-Verify, and businesses know about it. But businesses don't use E-Verify because we're simply not required to. And no business wants to take on more burdens than they're required to do. If we enforce E-Verify, a government project that's already on the books, that's already sitting there waiting for somebody to push the button, then every worker in America becomes documented immediately. You don't have a choice. You put some laws in place that say, hey, if you're going to break E-Verify, then your fines are going to be so odorous you can't bear them. The businesses will come forward and gladly obey. When they obey, they're documented. When they're documented, we know who they are and what kind of person they are, and then we can elect how many will come and go throughout the next years, who can stay and work until they earn their citizenship, who needs to get out of our country now. Every year we let 1 million people in legally. If there's 11 million, 10 years does the trick, right?
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
I'm going to defer that because I have not studied the 10th Amendment enough to answer that question clearly, and I apologize for that.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along then to your last question, number 6. Why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
Number 1, I will honor God as your congressman. I've remained devoted to my wife and family for 35 years. I will honor our Constitution, and when I'm asked the 10th Amendment, I apologize. I hit a roadblock blank there, but I will be able to answer that clearly. I will serve only 2 terms, so I do not become comfortable in this swamp that's Washington, D.C. I will oppose Department of Energy's undue regulations, as well as all of the other regulations that are passed by the EPA that affect our lives in a bad way. I will be the fresh, business-minded change our federal government desperately needs. Living and working in our district for 39 years gives me a perfect perspective to be your representative. I know how to meet a balanced budget. I know how to lead people towards a common goal. I will help make America in the 6th District of Texas great. I will protect our borders. Thank you so much for your time.
Please join me in thanking candidate Ratterree. Please welcome the audience. Our 5th candidate is Deborah Gagliardi. Ms. Gagliardi, if you would just join us at the podium. Just as a reminder, your timekeeper is this gentleman right here. He'll give you the yield sign and the stop sign. Question number 1, tell us about yourself and why you are running for office. Excuse me, let me repeat that. Question number 1, in 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
Good morning, I am Deborah Gagliardi. I'm an Arlington resident. I'm an architect, mechanical engineer, and contractor. And the reason I'm running, and most of the people in this room know, I've been an outspoken critic of our congressman for decades, even though a lot of people in this room told me, oh no, you've got to play along to get along and just let him get away with what he's done. I disagree, we deserve better. What made me decide to run? Well, I reached out to several, hey, who are we going to get, to finally replace him? And then whenever I found out that decision had been made for us, oh no, we've already decided. This was before the news hit the press. Then I was really offended. We deserve better than that. We do not need someone tapped on the back of the head and say, you're next, especially if they enabled that person to do as much as they did. I will fight for this district.
Thank you, ma'am. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
I think one of the biggest issues we have is people get up there and they promise you they're going to do all this. Joe's video kind of was indicative of what the rhinos do. It's just a lot of verbal masturbation. They get up there and promise you the world, tell you how happy you should be about it. We are not going up there and fighting. The whole play along to get along mentality is what has us in this position. The Constitution calls out our rights. It's like everything else. Let's add a new law, let's add a new ordinance. No, let's enforce the ones we have. Let's stand up and speak for those rights and tell them this is what we're going to do. These are the powers granted to us, and you're going to honor it and just keep making a scene until it's done.
Thank you, ma'am. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
I think right now we're looking at the problem with someone being up there for 32 years, chasing 36, 24, 36. Would I be in favor of term limits? If it was across the board, absolutely. But right now, we're not seeing that. I can assure you I will not be there more than 10 years, and I selected 10 years because it would transition you between 2 presidencies. People have the right to vote for their representatives. So I would not necessarily state that we should do term limits, but I would be all for everyone pledging in the beginning, this is how long I will be there, and holding them to their pledge.
Thank you, ma'am. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA? And would you support it as it is currently worded?
No, I would not support it in any manner. It is morally wrong. I have 4 daughters. I put them through college. Who in the world decided that if you came over to this country illegally, we owe you anything? What are they doing for us? If my oldest daughter worked overseas, she worked in Spain, she had to go through the process. She could not even get a citizen pass on the subway. So all of a sudden, because you've broken in to our home, you've invaded our country, we owe you something? No, and we can't just stop at DACA. We have to stop. I got to go to my happy place right now because this is a subject that really upsets me, especially when we have our current congressman up there praising it. Mm-hmm. No, it is wrong. It is wrong, and the cities have to stop it. The states have to stop it. They want to play on your heart. Oh my gosh, but it's a dreamer. It's a dreamer. Well, I have dreams too, and it's of lowering my taxes. I put all 4 of my girls through college. So no, we do not owe them anything. And if you look at the actual numbers, these kids are not dreaming of going to college. And if you've been here for 20 years, you've been here for 10 years, why have you not applied for citizenship? Why have you just been hiding here? And if your parents cared that much, why didn't they push you like the rest of us do our kids?
Thank you, ma'am. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
10th Amendment. Oh God, now I'm going blank. I'm going blonde. I know the X.
I can read the question again. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
All powers given, not given to this, to the government, are given to the states. And I firmly believe in this. And we do not take that, again, it's something we just roll over. Oh, we got to play along to get along. And we are not standing up for the right that is ours. We're not following the Constitution. We don't need more laws. We need to enforce the Constitution, and we need to enforce what is there now.
Thank you, ma'am. Your 6th and final question. Why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
I was interviewed yesterday for a segment that's going to run next week on women running for Congress. It was very interesting. We have 1 Republican female in the state of Texas. Texas claims we're so, oh, let's keep it red, we're all for rights and everything else. Not so much. They're not really representing. We have more Democrats, more liberal females in Congress than we do Republicans. Because the one we have is not conservative. Now, you shouldn't vote for me because I'm a female, because that's honestly offensive. That comes across a bit Hillary. That's like having, your vote decided for you. That's just wrong. You should vote for me because I have a long history of standing up to the abuse. I am the most qualified to deal with the infrastructure, and you already know that I'm willing to get up there and fight for our conservative values. Thank you.
Join me in thanking candidate Gagliardi. is Shawn Dubberly. Dubberly?
Shannon Dubberly.
Shannon Dubberly.
Yes.
Thank
I
you,
think
sir.
all works.
No, Shannon Dubberly.
Thank you.
No, we want to get it right, sir.
Yes.
Please join the podium. I'll also remind you, our timekeeper is right here. I'll give you a yield sign and a stop sign, and we'll get going. Question number 1. In 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Dubberly. I grew up in Crockett, Corsicana, Texas. I had an ideal childhood. I got an Eagle Scout, played sports, went to Texas A&M, if there's any Aggies in the house. Got my degrees in Russian studies as well as political science. I then went to the Bush School of Government and Public Service and got my master's degree in international affairs with an emphasis in national security. While there, I was chosen by the Department of State to serve in Kazakhstan and help move the embassy to the new capital. After that, I had the distinct honor of helping the greatest military on earth prepare for the war on terror. And I did that for several years, and then I served as a counterterrorism professional, chasing terrorists around the world and preventing them from entering the homeland. The Lord's blessed me with 3 children and an amazing wife, and that's why I'm here today. I want to protect my family and I want to protect yours, and we need a congressman that understands the threats that are emerging and can meet them head on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions will you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
Sure. We talk about term limits a lot. I think one of the things we should think about is possibly term limits for bureaucrats. That could be an interesting take in helping prevent some of their power. I believe also, as a congressman, you have to speak up and take them on head on. Ultimately the power of the government, yes, the president controls the executive, but Congress controls the budget. And if they're going off and trying to do things they shouldn't be, we can definitely control that by taking away their money, giving them the power not to do that.
Thank you, sir. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I am very much in favor of term limits. I myself am only going to run for 5 terms if I win. One, promised my wife, my oldest daughter is 7, and she'll be turning 18 by the time I be finished and going to college. Also, I believe that's enough time to where you can gain a little power for your district in Congress and represent them well. 2 to 3 terms, you don't really get as much leadership, you don't get as many leadership roles, and in that way you can really speak up and for your district and get what you need across and get as much legislation passed as you'd like. But 5 terms is what I plan to do.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
When President Obama first passed the DACA, I was obviously against it because of the overreach he did, and he circumvented Congress, and I'm against it now. I'm against amnesty. I think that we should know who's here, what they're doing, and if they're posing any threat to the country, they should be deported immediately. But no, I do not support DACA in its current form, and I think it was completely egregious that the Democrats held our military's budget hostage and our country's budget hostage for illegal immigrants. I think it's ultimately disgusting.
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
Sure. So everything that is not listed in the Constitution should be the power of the state. And within that goes from anything literally not enumerated in the powers from 1 through 9 or the 27 other amendments in the Constitution. I think it's clear. I would actually probably be in support of going against the 17th Amendment because when we were appointing senators to Congress, the states have more power, and now they're circumventing us and when they're popularly elected. So I'm a big supporter of the 10th Amendment and bringing as much power back to the state as we can.
Thank you, sir. Your 6th and final question. Why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
I'm sure you hear a lot of the same things from all the candidates, but for me, I'm the only candidate with counterterrorism experience, having served as a counterterrorism professional, and I have a clear understanding of the threats that we face and the emerging threats that are ahead of us with cyber terrorism and lone wolves. Also, having served or working in the oil and gas industry, I have a very good understanding of what really is the engine behind the Texas economy and how important it is to our district. Having grew up and lived in the district for most of my life, I also have a really good understanding of the history of our district and the modern needs we have and the investment we need to bring while maintaining our rural appeal. I also will bring a fresh perspective. I'm not a politician, and I'm not controlled by special interests, so I'd appreciate your vote on March 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Our seventh candidate is Kevin Harrison. Mr. Harrison, if you could just join us at the podium.
Absolutely.
I'll just remind you that you do have a timekeeper here. He'll have a yield sign and a stop sign.
Love the
And-
yellow.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and get started. In 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you are running for office.
My name is Kevin Harrison, and I'm a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. I've been married for over 30 years to my best friend, Becky, who's right over here. We've got 2 daughters, Michaela, who's a junior at TCU, and Juliana, who is a junior at Mansfield Lake Ridge High School. I have a unique set of qualifications that prepares me for this position. I served as a local pastor for over 30 years. I also was a vice president of a regionally accredited university. In addition, when I saw the cost of education was going out of control, I started my own college in 2006, and we've seen thousands of people come through our training in that time. I've walked through accreditation in the UK and in South Africa, and been walking through it as well here in the United States with our university. And so I've had a varied group of experiences, including at the Gathering Waco. I was bringing people together, over 30,000 people. I was in charge of bringing people together. I want you to know that I have the character for this position. I have the competence, I have the commitment, I have the courage, and I really believe that if you'll go to my website, kevinforcongress.org, that you will understand that I'm ready for this position.
Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
Well, one of the big problems that I would like to see, I think the federal government has too many controls anyway. I think they're too much into everything. I would like to go back to more states' rights. I'd like to see the state have more control over funding, things like that. I would like to see us get out of things like the Unaffordable Health Care Act. I'd like to see us get out of that. Nobody's ever said, hey, ever since the government got involved in this, we've been a whole lot better than what it was before. Nobody's ever said that. Because the government takes over something, they end up running in the ground. So we need to remove all the bureaucracy that we possibly can. We need to look at each department, each agency. We need to start cutting anywhere from 10 to 15, 20 to 25% of all of the agencies of their funding, because we've got too much money right now that is going toward our national debt. We are $20.6 trillion in debt. The only way we're ever going to be able to do this is if we cut spending, and we've got to get the spending somewhere down to around 15 to 17% of our gross domestic product. We need less government, less invasion of government. So as a congressman, what I would be for is I'd be looking at all the different departments and say, you know what, like education, for instance. I'm all for education. I'm in education. But the reality is that the Department of Education was formed in 1979 by Jimmy Carter. And when Jimmy Carter came along, he was trying to get the teachers' unions to vote for him. So he created a separate department specifically for it. I think we can move education and some other departments. We can bring these agencies together. We can make bureaucracy smaller.
Thank you, sir. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, how many terms?
I'm 100% for a constitutional amendment for this. And I'll tell you what, I believe in term limits. You can go to my website, you can find out everything about term limits there. I believe that every congressman, whether they're Senate or the House, they should not be able to serve more than 12 years inside of that. I would even be open to 8, because if our president can serve 8 years, I would be open to that. The only concern I would have with going down to 8 would be the fact is that the government may have a little bit too much change if we're going at 8. So I think 12 is more of a reasonable number that's there. As far as a constitutional amendment, one thing I would like to see, I would like to see senators not put in office for 6 years. I'd like to see them in office for 4 years instead of 6. Because then if you get a senator who's doing something they shouldn't be doing, you have to wait 6 years to get them out. We don't want that. We want to be able to have the opportunity to be able to get them out. So also then for congressmen, I'd like to see congressmen in this position run every 4 years as well. The reason being is if you win this election, whoever's going to win here, in 1 year, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be doing the same exact thing. So we've got a year of governing, then we've got a year of being elected all over again. So yeah, I'm for term limits, no more than 12 years, and I am for making sure that we have a constitutional amendment that would speak to the term limits, but it would also address the length of terms for senators and for members of House.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
Well, the answer is no on the way it's currently worded. I would not support the way it is. What I think we have to understand, and coming from a pastoral background, you have to understand that I'm all about tempering justice with mercy. It's important. And I think we have failed as a country to enforce our immigration laws for so long that we're at a point now where it's spinning out of control. So we've got to find a way that we can take control of this again. In fact, if you go to my website, I've got a plan. It's a 7-point immigration protection reform plan. Very specific with how we will deal with these things. Very specific. And I think what we have to do is we have to address the bigger issue. We've got to start specifically right now making sure that we get all the people out right now who are violent felons. We've got to get them out of our country. Then we've got to look and see how can we fix the system. My plan talks about how we can fix the system. In fact, it will bring money in so that we can actually build the border wall that we want to build. And so I would just encourage you, I would encourage America not to go the road that we're going right now with DACA. Look, I'm all for dreamers. I'm all for people who have a dream, who want to come to this country, and they want to see something great going on. I'm all for that. But friends, we do have a rule of law that's in our country right now, and we have to follow the rule of law. Now, the reality is, like many laws that get broken in our country, there's a thing called the statute of limitations. And after a statute of limitations takes place, what ends up happening? With the statute of limitations, certain things can't be charged. I want to find a way. My protection plan shows a way for us to be able to deal with every person who's here, deals with DACA, deals with the whole issue there, but I would not support it as it is currently, no.
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
States' rights. States' rights is what we're talking about here. I'm all about states. I'm all about states. I've talked about that from the very beginning. I'm all about making sure that states have the ability to do what they need to do. For instance, if we were to take the Department of Education, we've got a shortfall in our funding here for education here in the state of Texas. We're trying to find out where can we get the money from. Well, you know what? If we were to take the money that's being spent by the federal government and we were to reappropriate some of those funds and we were to give it to the states to allow the states then to be able to determine what education is going to look like, you know what's going to happen? All of a sudden, the state has the power once again. We need to empower our states to be able to do what our states need to do. Our federal government has overstepped into our lives. It does not belong in our lives the way that it's been. Our federal government has to take a step back. We have to demand it. As Republicans, conservative Republicans, we have to call on our government and all the people across this nation to say, you know what? The federal government has not done the job. They haven't done it. We need to allow our states to decide certain issues, what things are important, not having our federal government dictate and mandate to us what has to be done. So I'm all about states' rights.
Thank you, sir. And your 6th and final question. Why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
Well, sound bites. Sound bites. Most politicians, they work in what? They work in sound bites. I don't know about you, but I'll sit there and I'll talk to my TV on numerous occasions. I'll sit there and I'll listen to my TV and I'll hear a politician say, we need to do away with the income tax. Awesome, great. Well, what are we going to do to fund the military? Sound bite. Oh yeah, well, we can do away with property taxes. Great, awesome plan. But how are we going to fund education? Well, you know, we can go with the consumption tax. That's a great idea, right? Well, why don't you ask Japan how that worked out for them at the end of the 1990s? It just didn't work out for them. The consumption tax did not work. And friends, the reality is the consumption tax here in Texas would result in about 30 cents of every one of our dollars, according to most analysts, would go toward a consumption tax. It just doesn't work. It's a soundbite that plays to a political base. If you go to my website, you'll see I have more than sound bites. I have sound plans. Plans for national security, plans for reformation of Social Security, plans for getting out of debt, one of our huge national security issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking candidate first. Our next candidate is Ron Wright. Mr. Wright, if you would please join us at the podium. I'll also remind you that you have a timekeeper right here. We'll give you a yellow card and a red card. And we'll get started. Question number 1, sir. Tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
I've been a lifelong community servant. I want to continue that. I have a passion for public service. Going back 35 years as just a community volunteer, leadership roles as serving on boards and commissions. Of course, 8 years on the Arlington City Council, 6.5 as the tax assessor collector. I'm known. I'm a known quantity. People know that I stand up for conservative ideals. I have a long history of that. And I want to take that to Washington and represent all of you in the Congress.
Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to the Congress?
I'll tell you what, Congress for way too many years has ceded too much power to the executive. including in terms of the budget. We need to return that more to the Congress. We need to return more power to the states. Speaking of the bureaucracy, there's a lot of things the federal government does, the federal government doesn't be involved in, that needs to be passed off to the states. And the federal government needs to show a little more respect to the 10th Amendment because it's one of the most important. But the real power Congress has with regard to the bureaucracy is twofold. One is the budget. There's a lot they can do with that they haven't been doing. And the other is with their investigations. The investigative side of Congress is one of the most important functions they perform. And both sides do it. Whoever's in power is going to investigate the other side. But it's important because that's how the Congress can help control overreach by the executive and all the bureaucrats in Washington.
Thank you, sir. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for the members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
I would. I'll tell you that I have already publicly committed to 4 terms and no more. I can support what Ted Cruz has proposed if he would make it fair to the House. His proposal is 12 years for the Senate and 6 years for the House. I can't agree to that. Why would you penalize House members? But 12 years for both I could go for. I'm self-imposing at 8 years, 4 terms, and I'm going to come back home. I believe that's what, I don't think the founders ever envisioned members going to Congress for 30 years and making it a lifetime career. I think we've seen some of the damage that can come from being disconnected with the people. And so no, I'm for that.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
No, I wouldn't. Look, the left in this country has been very successful in convincing rank and file American people that some of our laws don't matter and that it's okay to break those laws. Well, it's not. Now, DACA in particular, we all know was unconstitutional. Obama even admitted that. But you see what's happened with the shutdown. You had a bipartisan bill. It included extending the CHIP program, the Children's Health Insurance Program, for 6 more years. It included things the Democrats wanted. But they've come up with that one thing, that one issue, and they have shut down the government because of that. And it is very important that Republicans stand up and lay the blame where it belongs, and that's on the Democrats in Congress. They're the ones that shut this government down, and the American people need to know it.
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
Well, basically, it means that the state retains all the powers except the powers enumerated for the federal government in the Constitution. Everything else belongs to the state. It's the states that empower the federal government. It's the states that created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. Everything started at the state level once we gained independence. Once we got through the Articles of Confederation, we wrote the Constitution. That was something the states did. And so all power of government belongs to the state except what the states have given to the federal government. And that's the traditional understanding. I wish it was taught in the public schools a little more. I wish it was taught in college classes a little more, because there's a general misunderstanding about the 10th Amendment. But it's vitally important. And we need to pull that back. We need to pull more power away from the federal government and keep it with the states.
Amen.
Thank you, sir. Your 6th and final question. Why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
I'm a known quantity. I have a record. I'm the only candidate that's been an elected official. I have a record as a conservative leader. I'm the tax assessor that went to Austin and testified in favor of property tax control. I'm the tax assessor that said no to blocking registrations for red light cameras.
Yeah.
I'm the tax assessor that put, you know, the national motto on tax statements and envelopes. I'm the tax assessor that went to war with Planned Parenthood and United Way funding of Planned Parenthood. My point is, and even as a city councilman, same thing. I stand up. I stand up, and I'm not afraid to take bold action. I'm not afraid to vote no in Congress, and that's one of the most important votes a member can cast. And I'm going to stand up in Washington, just like I've stood up for the people of Tarrant County as their tax assessor collector and the people of Arlington as their councilman. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Please join us in the Our ninth and final candidate for this position is Shawn Dandridge. Mr. Dandridge, if you join us at the lectern, just to remind you, there is a timekeeper right here who will have a yellow sign yield and a red stop sign. He's right here. Question number 1, sir. In 1 minute, tell us about yourself and why you are running for office.
Okay, well, first I'd like to thank my beautiful wife for being here with me. She's back there in the orange shirt. She's in law school, so I'm in the MBA program, so we don't really see each other during the week. I was in the Army for 11 years. I was medically discharged in 2016, spent 26 months in Iraq. I was awarded a Bronze Star for one of those deployments, not for valor. That's one of the 5th highest awards you can get in this nation. So I also spent a little time at the White House at the presidential level under Obama. That was one of my jobs I was told to go do, so I went and did it. I saw some things there that really upset me. I saw politicians from both sides of the aisle sell this country out for a little more than a campaign contribution or to advance their own agendas. So that really upset me, and the first moment I got to do something else about it, I took it. So that's why I'm here, and that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you, sir. Question number 2. What actions would you take as a member of Congress to limit the power of governmental bureaucracy, also known as the deep state, and return control to Congress?
Well, first, I think you need to get lobbyists out of the whole lawmaking business. Lobbyists are the destruction of this country. Lobbyists, they go into office, they promise these politicians campaign contributions, trips, and whatever else. And it's to the point now where lobbyists just walk in with laws and politicians just bring them to the floor. That's not your job. Your job is to write the law, not hand the law off from an establishment. Lobbyists don't K Street. So that's the first thing I think we need to do.
Thank you so very much. Question number 3. What is your opinion on term limits for members of Congress? Would you support a constitutional amendment to implement term limits? And if so, for how many terms?
Well, I've set a personal limit for myself at 5 terms, which would be 10 years. I would support a constitutional amendment for term limits, but I think the best term limits is the people getting out and voting these no-good politicians out of office. You don't need term limits if you get out and vote. You are the term limit.
Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is your opinion on DACA, and would you support it as it is currently worded?
Well, if you guys were down in Corsicana the other day, you know my opinion on DACA, and I hate it. I would not support anything on DACA. You're an illegal immigrant. We're a nation of laws. You should not be grandfathered into this country because you've been here illegal for so long. I mean, if you want to dream, you can go back to your own country and dream. We have ways and laws here that you can get into this country legally. And another thing I would get rid of is this crazy lottery system that we have here. What kind of sense does it make to have a lottery to come into the United States? You don't know who you're bringing in here, you don't know what they've done, and you don't know where they came from. You just drew a number and you're like, okay, you can come on over. So that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life for such a developed nation to have a lottery to get into the country. So no, I would not support anything concerning DACA, and we need to get rid of the lottery system.
Thank you, sir. Question number 5. What is your understanding of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution as it pertains to the state of Texas?
Well, Texas can, I'm not a historian, so I think it pertains to Texas can succeed from the United States at will, if I'm not mistaken.
Would you like me to repeat the question, or that's a full response, sir?
No, I'm good.
Okay, sir. Then moving on to the final question. Question number 6, why should we vote for you over all the other candidates?
Well, I think I bring a unique set of skills to the job. Like I said, I've worked at the highest level of government. You can't get any more higher than the presidential level. I've seen the things that politicians do at the presidential level and at the higher end of the senior staff level, and I'm just not happy. I think I would make an immediate difference in Congress. I mean, I wouldn't stand for anything any party puts on the floor that includes my own party. I think I'm the only candidate in this race that has been cussed out by Joe Biden and hung up on by President Obama for telling me no. So I have no problem telling anyone no. So if I don't agree with something, whether it's my party or the other party, I will not vote for it and I will not endorse it. So that's why I think you should vote for me, because I will be my own man.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our candidate forum for Family Court 325 and Congressional District 6. Please join me once again in thanking all the candidates who were here today. As your moderator, I remind you, take the information that you gained today and do the next thing that needs to be done, and that's go out and vote and include making sure that everyone in this room brings along 10, 20, 40 friends, because voting turnout is extremely important. With that, I'll turn it over back to our president, Carol Daly.
Let's give another round of applause to our candidates.